talk about some of the legal aspects where our children are concerned, what we see in the schools. I'm going to talk about some of the statistics that we see in the schools and just how popular it is and how do you know if your kid is vaping. I'm going to give you some tips on that, what to look for. As you know, there's so many different types of vaping devices out there, it's hard to keep up. And of course, here recently, we're starting to see some of the health effects that's been all over the media on vaping. And of course, it all started off as a cessation device to help people quit smoking, but now we're saying it may be just as dangerous as regular cigarettes. So let me just kind of start off with a little bit of the definition of what this term vaping is. I can get this working. I think here we go. Here we go. Okay, vaping. The active inhalant and aerosol. I know one of the misconceptions out there is that when you're using an e-cig, it's just water vapor. But the thing about it is, it's actually an aerosol. And it's a little bit more complicated than just water vapor. And it's a water vapor, it's an aerosol often referred to as a vapor, which is produced by an e-cig. This term is used because e-cigarettes do not produce tobacco smoke. It produces an aerosol mist, which they refer to it as a vapor, okay? The e-cig itself, electronic cigarette, is a handheld device that simulates the feeling of tobacco smoke. As I said earlier, there's a lot of different e-cigs out there, and I'm going to show some pictures of some of the ones that we've seen in schools here in a little bit, but there's so many different types. Just the basic e-cig, it works by heating a liquid to generate an aerosol commonly called a vapor that the user inhales. This is the basic format of just a basic e-cig. Every e-cig has to have a battery device. It has to have an atomizer, that's what heats up the liquid into an aerosol. It has to have some type of cartridge. Sometimes they call those cartridges pods and so forth, that contains the liquid that's being heated, and it has to have a mouthpiece. So this is just kind of a basic format of what every e-cig has, what it entails. I wanted to show this statistic. In 2017, the National Institute of Health Study found that 1 in 4 high school seniors reported vaping in the last year, and 16.6% had vaped in the last month. That just kind of shows you how popular vaping actually is. I want to go back to 2013. In 2013, 3 times as many U.S. high school students smoked cigarettes. That was a popular thing at that time. But in 2 short years, we've seen how that trend has changed so much. Within 2 short years, that trend reversed. Today, almost twice as many high school students vape rather than smoke. So cigarettes is no longer the popular thing. And then, of course, our middle school students have an even stronger preference of vaping because, of course, this is the generation that they're growing up in. That's what they see. So just like in our generation when we grew up, cigarettes was the thing. Now, of course, it's e-cigs. It's the vaping devices. My battery keeps going out here. Yeah, can you hit that for me? Okay, this slide here, there was a survey done in 2018 of 8th graders, 10th graders, and 12th graders. Here on the left-hand side, in the past year, 17.6% 8th graders reported that they had vaped. In 10th graders, it was 32%, and then as you see in 12th graders, it was 37.3%. That's a huge number because most of these students that admitted to vaping, they're not even of legal age in order to buy an electronic cigarette. So it's quite alarming. And then if you look at the right-hand side here, what do teens say that they're vaping? Of course, we have nicotine, We have about 30% say that they vape nicotine. Then you have marijuana or hash oil, and then some just flavoring. Of course, one of the things that's very attractive to our young people is these different flavors that these vapes pods can come in, whether it be mango, cream, and mint, all these different fruity flavors. So, of course, a lot of the advertisements are geared toward young people. That's what we're seeing. This slide here just kind of shows how popular, it's a money-making industry. It's a billion-dollar industry. In 2017, basically, e-cigs was a $10 billion. This is in millions, so this is actually that number reflects it's a $10 billion industry. So there's a lot of money into this vaping thing. It's all tied up into that. I wanted to kind of show you guys some statistics here in KDISD. Our calls for service. As I told you earlier, I work for the KDISD Police Department, and we get calls out to the schools, of course, or we have campus officers on every high school, and we get calls out to the schools. And this reflects the whole school district. During the 2016-2017 school year, in total, we had 65 calls for service dealing with e-cigs. Whether it be just a regular e-cig or we suspected that it had THC in it or whatever the case may be. In total, we only had 65. But as you see in that next school year, 2017-2018, it really skyrocketed. Our calls for service. The popularity of the e-cig went up very high. Basically, that jump right there is about from 65 to 153 is about a 135% increase. So it really skyrocketed. And then the following school year, which was last school year, we had a total of 185 calls for service. Just this morning, I ran some stats just to see how many calls for service that we've had so far this school year. Since we started school on August the 14th, we've had right at the number about 50 so far. So we're kind of staying on track to last school year. This is the law that's associated with vaping. I'm talking about just regular vapes, not using some type of legal substance, just a regular vape, tobacco-related vape. And one of the things that the legislator came out with was Senate Bill 21. It went into effect on September the 1st. Because before that, as you see in red, I have 21 years of age. Before that, you had to be 18 in order to purchase any type of tobacco-related device, whether it be an e-cig, cigarettes, or whatever the case may be. But even our legislator is trying to get on board with this and try to make it a little bit more difficult for young people to get their hands on vaping devices. So they bumped the age up to 21, and that went into effect, Senate Bill 21 on September the 1st. So, us in law enforcement, that gave us a little bit more legal room. But of course, even though most kids in school are under the age of 21, but even when they're not in school, as they get older, make it a little bit more difficult. They want them to be at least 21 before they make that decision whether or not they're going to vape or not. Now, this law right here, I just want to show it. It's not one that we utilize very much in the schools, but even if you, let's say, are of 21 age or over that, it's illegal to operate any type of e-cig in a primary school, whether it be a secondary or primary school. It's illegal no matter what age you are. So in other words, you can't do it at school and operate an e-cig at school. Okay, this is some of the punishment. I consulted the Justice of the Peace Court in Harris County, and I was wanting to know if we do file on a person that has a vaping device, I'm just talking about a regular vaping device, nothing that contains THC, what type of punishment would the student get? As you see on the first offense, this is normally what happens. They have to attend some type of tobacco awareness class, and they may have a $72 fine. And then the second offense, deferred adjudication, They have to take the class over again, so if they get caught a second time in school, apparently they didn't learn the first time, so they got to take it over again, and there's a $275 fine. And then the third offense could be a fine up to $500. So these are some of the consequences for getting caught with a vaping device in school. Okay, vaping in comparison to cigarettes. Vaping is more difficult to detect via the smell. Of course, the vape evaporates much faster than traditional smoke. E-cigs is easily concealable. These are just some of the reasons on why young people vape. And e-cigs can be used to smoke illegal substances, and which I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. And of course, the main thing is THC, which is the psychoactive ingredient that's found in marijuana. It can be used to smoke illegal substances. This is a photo of just some of the different types of e-cigs that are out there on the market. This is just a very bare minimum. I mean, there's a lot more. I mean, there's so many I can't even count. There's so many different types. They come in all shapes and sizes and forms. I'm going to talk about the most popular one here in a little bit, which is, I'm sure you probably have heard about, is the Juul. That's the one that we see the most, is the most popular among young people, is what they call the Juul. They use the term juuling. It's an e-cig that looks like a flash drive and can be charged in a laptop's USB port. Some of the ingredients inside of the Juul, I'm talking about the Juul pods, include nicotine flavorings, antifreeze derivatives, and benzoic acid. So it has different chemicals in there, so you're not just vaping water vapor. It does contain nicotine. The Juul, they say, is very easily concealable. Most of you probably have seen one before, but I have one right here in my pocket. As you can see how small it is. It looks like a flash drive. I know at one of the schools, I tell this story sometime. We had a teacher at one of the schools. She found one of these in her classroom on the floor. She didn't know what it was. This was a couple of years ago. She didn't know what it was. She had never seen one before. And she picked it up, and she got in front of the class. She held it up, said, "Did anybody lose their thumb drive?" None of the students would claim it. They thought that she was trying to play a trick on them and to admitting they had a e-cig. They knew what it was, the students did, but she honestly thought somebody had lost their thumb drive, and not knowing that this was an e-cig. So the Juul is probably one of the most popular. It has a little pod in here that you can take a loose. It has the liquid in there. Real popular among young people. Real popular among young people. Okay, this is a Juul starter kit. Let's go back to the back. This is a Juul starter kit that comes with everything. You can probably get one of those for about $20, $25. And it has everything you need to get started on the Juul. And as I was saying earlier, the flavorings are very popular. What we're seeing nowadays is young people are trading pods with each other. Hey, have you tried Fruity Mint? Why don't you try this one? I'll give you melon for your Fruity Mint. That's how popular. They're trading, different flavors with each other. And the thing about it is, Juul, as I said, was probably the most popular. This company here is E-Smoke, actually, that made these pods. They're not even Juul, but everybody's jumping on the bandwagon because that's the money maker, and they're making pods that are compatible, that fits inside the Juul, at a cheaper price. So people can go out and buy an alternative. Instead of buying a Juul pod for the Juul, they can go out and buy one by E-Smoke a little cheaper, and it still fits their Juul. So everybody's jumping on that bandwagon. This is a young lady just they're smoking a Juul. How do you utilize it? Okay, I mentioned earlier THC. Of course, that's the chemical responsible for most of marijuana's psychological effects on the brain. I know Ms. Hino's going to talk on a lot of the health effects or whatever, but yes, young people are using THC in their vaping devices. And of course, I talked about some of the law earlier, and I told you you have a regular vaping device, like a tobacco-related type vaping device, it's just a Class C misdemeanor. It's like getting a speeding ticket if you're underage and you have one in your possession. But if they're in possession of THC, it gets a lot more serious than that. It turns into a felony type crime. Because the thing about it is, the THC concentration level that are in some of these vaping pods can be up to 50 to 80% THC in it. And I'm sure you guys probably have heard stories on the news where people have hit vape pens that had THC and they passed out and so forth. We had one at Tomball ISD not too long ago. Okay. So that's why it turned into a very serious crime, because these things can be very dangerous. Yeah, a normal marijuana cigarette, I think I have a slide that shows that, but a normal marijuana cigarette has about 12 to 13% concentration level of THC. But your THC, some of these vape pods have 50 to 80%, so it skyrockets. Yeah, here's the slide here. This is one of THC oil concentrates have 50 to 80% THC potency level, where your normal marijuana cigarette has about 12 to 13%. So, as you can see, that's a big jump. That's a big jump. Okay. I told you how serious it can be. It can turn into a felony crime, a felony type crime. Well, it depends on the amount and how much you have as how serious that felony can be. Like I said, I'm not going to bore you with all the legal aspects of it, but I just want to see it depends on, if you have less than a gram, 1 to 4 grams, and so forth, or how serious that crime could be. This is a slang term. Some of you may have heard that term of dab. They call it dabbing or dab pen. That's a device that has THC oil in it inside of an electronic cigarette. They call it a dab pen. Why they use that term, really don't know. I'm not talking about dab, the dance, or anything like that. You probably heard of that. But I think what it amounts to is that you don't need much to get high with that THC oil because of the concentration level. So a little dab will do you, basically, is what it amounts to. Okay? These are just some of the things, some of the dab pens, what they look like, some examples of them. Okay, dabbing, that term, that's a slang term. Dabbing is inhaling vapors from a concentrated marijuana made by the extraction method using butane gas. So that's kind of the extraction method that they use. And down here at the bottom in red, you can see some of the slang terms that some of these THC oils and wax-based type concentration levels, what they're called, like butter, honeycomb, earwax. What you see here is that a lot of these get that slang name from the appearance of the item. And I'm going to show here the picture here. As you can see, some of this looks like butter. Some of it looks like earwax. That's actually concentrated levels of THC right here. And, of course, once they go into an e-cig, it heats up, it turns into a vapor, and that's what's smoked. But these are real high concentration levels of THC. This is some of the THC oils in the different vials. On about 2 years ago, we found this here on one of our campuses. On the left here, this is an edible that contains THC. On the right here, we have a dab pen that contains THC. I want to explain this, though. If we suspect a young person at the school is in possession of a THC device, we don't just take that as face value. That liquid has to be sent off to the lab, and we have to get lab results to confirm that, okay? So we don't take that young person into custody right then and there, okay? We want to be sure, that it is what it is, because like I said, it is a pretty serious crime. It turns into a felony. So we don't want to just ruin a young person's life if we're not sure what we're doing. So we send it off to the lab first and verify it is what it is before, we take law enforcement action on that. This was also found at one of our campuses. As you see on the left there, that one says wedding cake flavor. and it says THC 91%. So that one was pretty much a given. That was a clue that it probably contained THC in that vial. That was kind of a dead giveaway, but we still sent it off to the lab. And then on the right-hand side here, those are some gummies, edibles, that contain THC. These are just some of what some of these e-cigs look like. On the left there, you have the Juul, probably the most popular. Then you have just a regular vape pen in the middle, and then there's another one here on the right-hand side. They come in all shapes and sizes, all different types. Again, we have the Juul, and then this one over here is the Surin Drop, another popular one that we see in schools. As you see, it's kind of a weird shape. This particular slide right here, this was a couple of years ago. We found this at one of our schools. Actually, we have 2 canine dogs for the school district. We have 2 dogs, and one of our dogs actually alerted on this one. It was inside of a backpack. The dog actually alerted on this one during a search of a classroom. Okay? There was about 13 vials there. I want to go back there, and you see there's some cash there also. There was $1,300 in cash. And the question was, well, what are we going to do with the cash? We know we got to send the vials off to the lab and so forth. One of the things we did with that one is it was in Harris County, so we had to call the district attorney's office and say, well, we got this person in possession of these dab pens, vials, and so forth, and he also has $1,300 in cash on him, possibly drug money, possibly. So the DA said, well, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take the money and put it in a separate room, and then send the dog in there and see if the dog will alert on that money. If the dog alerts on that money with that smell, then we're going to consider it drug money, then you confiscate it. And in this situation, we did that, and the dog did alert on that money. So it was confiscated. How do you know if your child is vaping? These are just some of the clues I want to put out there to you guys. Unfamiliar objects, most common among teenagers, vape pens and the Juul. If you see something unfamiliar in your child's classroom, in your bedroom or at home or whatever the case may be, you may want to look at it twice. Like I said, I showed you the Juul earlier, and most of you may have seen what it looks like. Most of you haven't. So if you see something unfamiliar, you may want to look into it. Mysterious aroma, these fruity smells. Sometimes the young people are not always just burning incense. It could be something else if you have these sweet smells. Just something to be aware of. This number 3 says sensitivity to caffeine. Let me just kind of explain that one. What happens is if you are using a e-cig vaping device and you mix caffeine with it, it sometimes makes the person feels a little jittery, and it's kind of like overload. So a lot of times if they're using e-cigs, they'll shy away from their caffeine drinks, because they don't want that overload. Just want to explain that one. And then, of course, number 4, the thirsty, dry mouth. Is some of the chemicals that's in the e-cig is the propylene glycol. And then the 5th one is, and you see some type of weird metallic wires or cotton wicks, it could be some type of charging device for an e-cig, if you see something that doesn't look familiar. So these are just some of the tips on some things to watch out for. I want to show this video. This is from a news story here locally. It aired about a month ago, so things have changed in that month's time, but I want to show this one anyway.
6 deaths are now connected to a growing public health crisis tied to vaping. The newest death is in Kansas, where health officials say a patient who used e-cigarettes recently died of lung disease. The exact cause of that illness is under investigation. The CDC says it's looking at more than 450 cases of vaping-related illness across the country. 3 of those cases are in Houston, where Janet Shamlian is at the city's health department. Janet, what's happening there?
Anthony, good morning. Well, the city's health director is calling these illnesses an outbreak, and the CDC is reporting at least 33 states and the U.S. Virgin Islands have cases of this severe lung illness directly tied to vaping. Hawaii and Idaho announced their first cases on Tuesday. Now, some of these involve vaping both nicotine and marijuana, and this morning the fear is the number of cases will rise.
This is a new outbreak which is occurring across the nation.
Houston's health director talked about the expanding epidemic tied to vaping. Its exact cause still unknown, but in 3 confirmed cases, there's one specific connection.
What are the commonalities in these cases?
So the commonality we're seeing in these cases, unfortunately, is that all of them are young people. This is the age when people start making their life choices, and this is a bad choice.
The CDC reports more than 20% of high school students use or have used vaping products. 17-year-old Whitney Livingston was hospitalized 2 weeks ago in Dallas. She and her mother blame her 2-year vaping habit for her severe lung injury.
The ventilator was the best thing because she could not breathe on her own.
The deadly respiratory disease that has now claimed 6 lives across the U.S. is impacting people of all ages. The Kansas Department of Health says a patient over 50 who did have pre-existing conditions died as a direct result of vaping. Others becoming sick have been young and in good health. Idaho and Hawaii reported their first illnesses Tuesday, and the American Lung Association is out with a new warning: do not use e-cigarettes.
I think the Lung Association's giving very sensible advice.
Stanton Glantz, professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco, says it's time for the Food and Drug Administration to act.
So far, they've expressed a lot of concern, but they haven't yet issued a single regulation about e-cigarettes.
At this time, no specific product or ingredient can be definitively linked to these illnesses, and that's a big problem for investigators looking at this. Doctors here say of the 3 people who've gotten sick, they are recovering, but they're not certain whether they will ever fully recover. Tony?
Frightening. Janet, thank you very much.
Okay, that was, of course, kind of local news story associated with Houston. I said that one was about a month ago. Of course, deaths across the nation now has risen. It's no longer 6, it's in the 20s. I think it's up to like 27 at this point. Things are constantly changing week by week by week. So it's pretty scary. You know, I know Ms. Hinote is going to get into some of the health effects, but it's pretty scary. You know, now we're starting to see, you know, some of the dangers of what this vaping is really doing. We're starting to, you know, see what's happening now. So I just want to kind of show that one just so we can be aware. You know, we can have that conversation. Ms. Hinote is going to talk about that conversation with our kids, you know, how to talk to them about some of these health effects and dangers, you know, what resources to go to and look at to get more information about vaping also, okay? This last video before I turn it over to Ms. Hinote deals with what some of the doctors are asking young people when they come in with these symptoms about coughing and wheezing and, you know, when they've been vaping, just some of the things to ask these young people, and this is something to ask your student also, that when you have a dialogue with them about vaping. So I'm going to show this one, then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hinote. She's going to talk about some of the health effects.
Hey there, folks. KHOU reporter Melissa Correa joining you in the newsroom. We wanted to walk you through one of the stories that you'll see later today on the news, but we wanted to share the information with you now. And it's about the concerns related to e-cigarettes and vaping. We've seen a lot of chatter about this in headlines here at KHOU and across the country. And we're working with our partners in the Texas Medical Center. In fact, we just received some interesting information from Dr. Amy Arrington with Texas Children's Hospital and the Baylor College of Medicine. She actually sent out some questions to the Texas Children's Hospital community, asking doctors to look at these questions and ask them of their teen patients if they're concerned that vaping may be the cause of some of the medical concerns. And so we wanted to pop these questions up to you so you can see what Dr. Arrington is asking her colleagues to say. And she says, listen, begin with asking teens about a history of inhalation drug use, specifically with electronic devices. And that's because we've heard of teens using e-cigarettes to vape either nicotine or THC, which is basically marijuana. She also wants doctors to ask their patients about the frequency of use, specifically are they smoking THC, and if possible, how they got the device, how they use the device, the brand name of it, and if they've modified that vape pen in any way. She's also asking doctors at Texas Children's Hospital to get information like, where did the teen purchase the vape pen? And I think this is because what we're hearing from the FDA and CDC is like a lot of mystery surrounding e-cigarettes and vape pens, especially with this massive spark of teens either becoming really sick or, worst case scenario, losing their life from some sort of connection with this electronic cigarette. Okay, and she says, be aware that the illness can worsen over time, and some suspect cases have required high-level intensive care and respiratory support, which leads us to this next slide that we created with you, or created for you with the help of these doctors, which are the symptoms that may be linked to vaping. And listen to this. It could be something as simple as coughing, shortness of breath, chest pain, and fatigue. She also wrote to doctors that many patients also experience significant GI symptoms like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and weight loss. She also said that a lot of these patients that have had a history of vaping will be diagnosed with atypical pneumonia. And she said all patients have reported using e-cigarette products, and the symptom onset has ranged from a few days to several weeks after that e-cigarette use. And while THC has been reported in a majority of patients, not all of them. No single substance or e-cigarette product has been consistently associated with any of these patients. And this is what she's asking doctors at various Texas Children's Hospital locations to be on the lookout for. You know, if you're seeing patients come in, self-report with some of these symptoms, you gotta ask them about the vaping. And the interesting thing, we've included the link below in this article, is that the Baylor College of Medicine just released research study in which they tested the health effects of vaping on 4 different groups of mice. I'd encourage you to click on that link. This is one of the latest research studies surrounding the health effects of vaping, which may be used by the FDA and CDC to better get a handle on what this is doing to our bodies. Of course, look for more coverage. We'll have more from Dr. Arrington on KHOU later today.
Okay, so here we go. Let's talk about the health effects that vaping has to do. I don't have my clicker working, so Ted's going to work it. The main ones that we're going to talk about is going to be the brain that is affected, the lungs, and external physical damage. So I thought this was a good, powerful little slide. It's a vending machine. You can't just step right up and purchase a new one. You got what you got. No returns. So, the brain. Let's talk about the brain. It's the last organ to develop. We, as infants, we all know the child development stages. We move from concrete learning to abstract learning. In the part of the brain, that process, the brain is the last one, and it's going to develop all the way up to the age of, to their mid-20s, all the way up to 25. That's how long it takes for the brain to develop. Nicotine enters. Nicotine is going to enter, and it's going to interfere because it's going to interfere with that nervous system. The part of the brain that we're mostly talking about is that decision-making part of the brain. Addiction, it's a form of learning. And this nicotine is going to affect things such as your mood disorders, your lower impulse control, and changes in attention and learning. So when nicotine enters the brain, enters the body, what it does, just think of your body, think of your brain as like a computer system, a binary process. And what nicotine does, it comes in, these brown dots here are nicotine. And your nerve, down the arm of a nerve, it travels. It's going to send these messages. This gap right here between the purple and this red, that's called a synapses gap. And these messages get sent from one nerve to the next, but it has to cross this gap to get to the next nerve to send the message. Nicotine messes that gap up. It imitates things, these messages that are called neurotransmitters. Those neurotransmitters are your endorphins, it's the dopamine, it's the things that make you feel good, it's the things that put you in a mood. And so when nicotine enters, it's faking, it's imitating what naturally should be happening in your body. So as you see, the brain is going to continue to develop all the way up to the age of 25. Addiction happens because once nicotine is entered, it wants to mess up those messages that are being transferred to your brain. It wants to throw off what those neurotransmitters message is sending to the brain. So let's go ahead and move and look at the lungs that's going to happen now. The biggest thing with the lungs is the flavoring that's in these pods, the flavoring, the chemical that they're using. It's called diacetyl. And diacetyl is the main chemical that they're using in the flavorings. And we'll get to another slide here in a little bit on what's really happening minutely with the lungs. But just realize that the vapor, even though it's called a vape, it's really not a vape. It's really an aerosol. And so just imagine inhaling an aerosol with organic particles, with metals, with all that stuff. Even though a cigarette has nicotine and tar, you just have a different delivery system of nicotine, organic particles, metals. The lung disease that they're talking about, like they did in the video, those are the clinical presentations. So you're going to see a step up. The CDC is wanting these healthcare providers to start asking some really hard questions for people who are presenting themselves with bronchitis symptoms, with a cough that won't go away. They're asking those hard questions, about vaping. Are you smoking? Did you put anything, any chemicals or anything? Did you alter the device in any way? Nicotine is, like I said, these are the things that you're looking at inhaling in this aerosol. Nicotine, ultrafine particles, flavorings, organic compounds, cancer-causing chemicals, heavy metals, even though it says zero. Next picture is going to show you've heard the term of popcorn lung, and the reason why they got that term, the popcorn lung, is because this is what it actually looks like, the popcorn lung. As you can see, the narrowing and the scarring. Scarring tissue is non-functioning tissue. Once it's destroyed, it's not rejuvenated. It doesn't regenerate. That's the normal lung. Popcorn lung, before I go on, popcorn lung actually got its name because they found this same type of lung disease in factory workers that used to work in the popcorn factories. And they used that diacetyl in popcorn for the butter tasting flavoring. But all the workers were coming down with this lung illness. Same thing that we're seeing. And so that's why they got the term popcorn lung, because those little tiny sacs were getting destroyed and they were looking like on the film little pieces of popcorn with scarring tissue. Okay? So the external and the physical harm that we're seeing are the fires and the explosions. That's because they are altering these devices. They're taking the devices apart and putting stuff in it, such as THC, other things, other chemicals. Children, poison control, they have gotten an increase in calls because little children are getting into the flavorings, thinking that it's candy, and they're getting it poisoned, even soaked through their skin because of the oils. And now they're starting to see these people who are reporting vaping, that they are starting to have seizures, that they've never had a seizure before in their life, and now they're getting seizures because it's messing up Like when I talked about with the brain, it's messing up the neurosystem, the neurotransmitters, and it's throwing the body into Crazyville. So this was a bad day. This was a gentleman who altered his device, and he heated it up, and it exploded. Okay? So some of the side effects that you're going to see with vaping, as you can see, a lot of them have to do with dryness. Do you remember some of these things that you're going to see when many moons ago, when cigarettes were the thing on the market? It was cool. Some of the best movie stars were smoking. Some of the best looking people. You could lose weight. All these wonderful things. The medical profession is so pleased with the decrease in cigarette smokes. I love it when I hear it on the radio. Who smokes now? We know they're smokers, but they have decreased dramatically. You see a lot of dryness, because that's what smoke does. Sensitive bleeding gums. If you take your child to the dentist, they can kind of see some things that are going on. Cough and a throat irritation. Are they sucking on a lot of hard candy a lot? Why? Headache, nosebleeds, and dull ability to taste food. And the reason why they have the dull ability to taste food is because of the metals that are in the vaping. These are the side effects when they put nicotine in with the vaping. They have an inability to sleep. They have the racing, abnormal heart patterns, ringing in the ears. You will see ringing in the ears as a classical sign for a lot of toxicity and nausea, constipation, and tiredness. So why? Why are we here again? Reasons for e-cigarettes to be enticing to young people. And this is something important for parents to always do, is try to put yourself in your kids' shoes. Why are we here? They're hearing that it's less harmful. Let's just talk a little bit about these marketing tactics that they're trying to sell. That it's less harmful, it's cheaper. That flavoring sure is appealing to those young folks. They have the lack of smoke appeal, which is you don't smell like smoke. You don't have the yellowness. Okay? You're not irritating somebody next to you, that doesn't want you smoking around them. They think it's fun and cool. One of the biggest things that we're seeing is that they like sharing their vaping stories. They like sharing it on the Snapchat, YouTube, and Instagram. They want to be a star. They want to show the O-rings that they can do, the tricks. Do you remember way back with the cigarettes? Cigarettes, kids used to do the O-rings. They used to be cool to blow the smoke up your nose. Is that right? Isn't that what they used to do? So watch out. Watch out for those flavorings for these devices. This is what they're targeting our kids with. They're easy to use and hide, and then they have their vaping culture, which is their YouTube. And then these devices are not harmful, is what the message is saying. They're telling our kids that it is safer, that if you smoke, it's a much better alternative. And all of these marketing statements are false. Okay? Juul. Juul is not a Juul. Amount of nicotine in one Juul cartridge is the amount of nicotine in a pack of cigarettes. Juul launched in 2015, and Juul owns 3/4 of the cigarette market. Juul continues to block and prevent FDA regulations. Juul is investing a lot of money in the lobbying efforts because they are trying to block the regulations that we have on these products. And of course, the supply and demand. Follow the money. If kids want it, if kids are buying what they are trying to sell, then the supply is going to go up. The demand is there, the supply will be there. So question for you. True or false? E-cigarettes create a harmless water vapor. We know now it is not a harmless vapor. Okay? The tobacco industry is in the e-cigarette game. This is true. They are in the game. They don't want the regulations. Short little video for you.
You've heard this a million times already, but who cares? You want to know what's going to happen? No? Too bad. Smoking a single pod is the same as smoking a pack of cigarettes. What does that mean for you? Well, for starters, your memory's going to be affected. You're not going to be able to learn properly. Teacher's going to ask you to the board, and she's going to be like, solve this problem, and you're like, I can't even remember what 2 + 2 is. The class is going to be laughing at you, and then the teacher's going to ask you to leave the classroom. There's also concentration and self-control. You're not going to be concentrating on the road. You're going to be reaching over for the jewel, and next thing you know, you're swerving into oncoming traffic, and then you're going to be hitting a family on their way to their family vacation to Wally World. That doesn't sound like a good experience, does it? You think it's going to put you in a good mood? Wrong. It's going to put you in a crappy mood. You're going to be at the dance. Next thing you know, your date leaves you by yourself, and you're going to be there calling your mom to come pick you up early. Do you really want that? Oh, and your lungs? You know, the 2 airbags that expand in order for you to play the tuba? Well, you have lung disease, so you can also kiss that athletic scholarship goodbye. Because the chemicals inside the pods, they cause popcorn lung. What's that? Imagine your worst acne day times 50, but it's inside your system. There's also the small necessity called breathing. And you keep going back to the flavor? Yeah, that's called addiction. Either way, if you want to keep doing this, or if you want to live, it's up to you.
Nicotine is highly addictive and can slow brain development in teens, affect memory, concentration, learning, self-control, attention, and mood. Vaping. Okay, so what do? We need to talk with our kids. We, here in KDISD, we appreciate every single one of you guys that are here and tuning in, because one step towards doing something is to be able to collect credible information. Be patient and ready to listen. Try to stand in their shoes. Start where they are. Set a positive example. It's never too late to quit. If you smoke yourselves, it's never too late. So start the conversation. How are we going to start the conversation? We need to be ready to answer their questions. We need to know, be prepared to answer their questions. So what's the big deal? So what's the big deal is that this is a choice. Okay? This is a choice. It's something like I talked about with the brain development. When we're talking to our kids, this is your opportunity to still parent them, care for them, and to help mold them into developing that decision-making process that is still in its infancy. It's still being developed. Teach them how to make these decisions, these right choices. They may ask you, so aren't e-cigs safer than cigarettes? No, they're not. And you used to use tobacco, so why shouldn't I? Because you want your kids to be smarter. You always want them to be better than what we are. Okay? Here are some resources that you guys can go to collect some good information to try and stay 2 steps ahead of your kids. You can go on to the CDC, the FDA, e-cigarette Surgeon General, the DSHS, the American Lung Association. Catch My Breath has an excellent program. MD Anderson Cancer Center, they have an Aspire program that is willing to help mentor and promote and support. Your physician or your campus nurse. So resources to quit. There's the Truth Initiative quitting program, American Lung Association, MD Anderson Cancer Center. There's the smokefree.gov or call 1-800-QUIT-NOW. There's the teensmokefree.gov. Once again, your physician or your campus nurse. So to report tobacco law violations, you can report them to the Texas Comptroller's Office, the e-cig and tobacco hotline. Direct numbers are 512-463-3731, or you can email tobaccoenforcement@cpa.texas.gov. We have our Speak Up app for you to also, for students and parents that can report the use of tobacco, e-cigarettes, and other devices anonymously through the Speak Up app. It can be downloaded from the Google Play App Store, as well as online form linked to each KDISD webpage.